Hi, everyone. My name is Monica McNeil. I'm a senior on the track and field team. Today, I'll be serving as the moderator for this roundtable. The purpose of this panel is just to have a conversation and have meaningful dialogue about the insights of our lives and our experiences. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves now. We can start with Day.
My name is Day Jones Roundtree. I'm a senior here at Pittsburgh, at University of Pittsburgh. I run track and field. My major right now is Africana Studies and Urban Planning. I'll be graduating this spring. Um, I think that's pretty much all.
Hi, I'm Sanaza. I'm a senior on the University of Pittsburgh volleyball team. I am a double major in natural sciences and psychology, and I will be graduating in December of 2021.
Thank you. So I guess we'll hop right into it. It's February, so I'm going to start off with just asking, like, how do you guys celebrate Black History Month and what's the importance to you?
So for me, every year on Black History Month, I do a series on my Instagram, or I've done in the past on my Snapchat, where I make a post every day. In the past, it used to be like a person from history. So I would post like 28 or 29, whatever, historical figures. But this year I've been doing kind of a mix of historical figures and also like Black organizations and Black businesses, because I think that's more like action based, and that's kind of what I want to get across, especially this year. So that's kind of something that I honestly kind of do for myself, because it just makes me feel more connected and more engaged. But obviously, I do want people to get involved. So
I would say for me, Black History Month, I really just try to put an emphasis on the learning process of inclusive learning, as far as all races and the struggles of all minorities, and what we have been through in the past and present of American history. I went to African Center schools growing up, so we always had a special celebration during the month of February. Remembering people, every day, learning new facts about, lesser known figures in the fight. So I always try to just make people more aware this month more than anything, and play my part in making people aware of Black History Month and the importance of it.
Ade, you mentioned the school that you went to a little bit. Could you kind of just elaborate on that and how you got to where you are today?
Growing up, fifth grade, starting in fifth grade, I went to an African Center school called Harambe Institute. It's located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That was where I found my base and, African Center learning. So it's always been a passion of mine. Really starting from the home, really, from the age of 3, we started celebrating Kwanzaa. So that was really influential in growing up and understanding the importance of my ancestors. So going into middle school, I already kind of had sort of a base, but it allowed me to be surrounded by my peers and really have an emphasis on African American and African heritage. um, have a focused learning. I was able to be surrounded by people that I felt as though really cared about my future as a person, which was really good for me. Not just as in academics or athletically, but really just truly as a person. I went on to go to a high school called Imhotep Charter. That was very influential for me because it was opportunity once again to be surrounded by peers, and we are all going through similar situations, and a chance to learn about our African heritage even further. We had mandatory classes such as African American history, so that really played a part in emphasizing you know um, all around education and history in schools. Something that's really big for me. As well as world history. So being in those schools really allowed me to find my base and figure out, what direction I wanted to go into, and you know, see what other people that were around my age and older than me had been through and were going through.
Thanks for sharing that. Do you have any insight on your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Oh Lord. So well, I'm originally from Nigeria, so I was born in Nigeria, and then I came to the U.S. when I was around 5 or 6. I have gone to private schools my whole life, so I have been kind of the opposite of a day. I've been in a lot of schools where the population was majority white. And I think that's why now I make it a point to be more open about celebrating Black History Month, because in the past I didn't feel like I could be, because I wanted to assimilate and all that kind of stuff. So, I guess that is kind of like why now I'm trying to be more vulnerable and courageous and just myself and authentic about this whole thing, because it's really easy to kind of fall back on old habits and like censor yourself. And even today, like I still am like, I'll see something on Twitter and I want to retweet it, but I'm like, oh, what if someone gets mad? Or and old habits are really hard to break. So I think it's me consistently kind of pushing against that part of my upbringing, which is, I think, is helping me kind of heal and grow more into myself.
Thank you. So I think it's kind of interesting that you guys come from like two different backgrounds, like you predominantly white background and they predominantly Black background. How would you say that shaped your experience as a Black student athlete coming to a PWI?
You want to go first?
I'll go. I was like, wait. Okay. So, volleyball in general is a pretty white sport. I mean, that's just kind of the reality of the situation. So I remember before I came here, there were no Black girls on the team. So I was nervous about that. Not because, again, I was used to being around populations that were majority white, but in high school, I'd kind of found a group of Black girls in my school that were like my closest friends. So it was weird kind of going from that, these girls I'd kind of been with for 4 years, and then like kind of moving away from that and then right back into like a very white space. But I think, obviously like a lot of it comes from just like the culture of our team, to be honest, because I know it can't be said for every Black volleyball player that's on a majority white team, but I know for me, like I really felt comfortable like from day one. And, obviously if you're the only Black person, you're going to notice. So it's not like it was all rainbows and ponies all the time, but I think like having that experience in the past and then like having, a really good group of Black friends in high school kind of made me a little more, I guess, determined to make the best of my situation and determined to just kind of like embrace that side of myself more. And yeah, but a huge part of it honestly is my team, and especially like our coaches and our leadership, because a lot of times it's easy for like teams kind of follow the leadership, right? So, if we have coaches that are like consistently like talking about inclusivity and, always trying to get a different perspective, things like that, and like making sure that I feel like I can voice my opinions. I feel comfortable being myself and I don't feel like I'm going to offend anyone on my team. That's really important, so it was a combination of a lot of things.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I said that like you guys came from two different backgrounds. You predominantly Black background, her predominantly white background. So I was just curious how that has shaped your experience as a Black student athlete coming into a PWI.
This decision to come here was something that was very influential in my journey, leading up to me being a senior now. I would say this because my background, everybody in my family has gone to HBCUs. So I'm the first one to, go to a PWI. I had offers from HBCUs, and coming here was, a decision that I really had to sit down, talk to my parents about, talk to, some close friends, some relatives about, and, make the decision that was best for me. So coming from high school, it's always, especially something from my neighborhood, um, it's something that's glorified, making it somewhere where that's not your neighborhood anymore. Everybody in the neighborhood is proud of you. You're somewhat looked at as, a chosen one or somebody that, has made it out of a very select few. So my journey coming here was, something that I always wanted to do. Growing up in my neighborhood, I always, looked up to the older guys, wanted to be, somewhat what they were or where they were. And, a lot of the times, they were places where I wouldn't want to end up, and to be blunt, that's either the graveyard or a prison cell. So it was an accomplishment for me to get here and, be able to achieve something that I always told my parents that I would, from a very young age. So my journey getting here was, it was something that I worked really hard for. I worked really long for, and I was willing to do whatever it took to, come here and be able to get the experiences that I wouldn't have accessibility to in my community. So me being able to get here was me taking advantage of every step that it took to become a student here at the university, and doing everything that I had to do to get accepted to some of the best universities in the country. And University of Pittsburgh is definitely one of the top universities in the country. So it was an achievement for me, and it was a tough decision, but it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. So um, everything worked out for the best. And through everything that I went through, it was um it was a very long um a very long process. And being able to make it somewhere where a lot of people don't get to make it was a very big accomplishment for me. So my journey here was great, and I'm glad for every step of it.
Thanks for sharing that, I think. So kind of just to fast forward into your experience right now, what are some issues that you guys see that affect Black student athletes maybe more than others?
I mean, a lot of things. I think one of kind of the main ones I've kind of been thinking about more recently are, sometimes, especially in more revenue generating sports, a lot of times Black student athletes are pigeonholed into certain majors or certain kind of roles. And really in any sport, Black student athletes often are kind of, how do I say this, like reduced down to kind of athleticism and raw talent in a way that isn't representative of like their hard work or their IQ or their intelligence. I mean, people have talked about this before, but kind of describing Black athletes as raw and athletic and strong and a freak and like all this stuff, and then describing athletes that are white as really high IQ player, they really work hard, they kind of diminishing the efforts that Black student athletes have to make. And then as far as like academics is concerned, kind of the same thing, like trying to get all of the best out of Black student athletes that you can on the court or on the field or whatever the playing surface is, and not really caring for their development in other ways. And I mean, that's kind of a larger conversation about exploitation in general. I mean, with the way people talk about Black student athletes, sometimes it feels like they're talking about like robots or kind of like almost like cattle sometimes. Like it's very dehumanizing in that way. And I think it can be easy for people to kind of write Black student athletes off as it's not like someone's child, right? Like that's someone's kid, that's someone's friend, that's someone's sister, that's someone's brother, right? And it can be easy for people to kind of see like, oh yeah, like they're a student athlete, like they get everything they want, so I can talk about them any kind of way. And it's especially tough for Black student athletes. So those are just a couple of things that I've seen personally.
You said, what are some things that
Issues,
student athletes?
issues that affect Black student athletes more than others.
Accessibility. I would say that I've had several conversations with other African American and minority athletes, And one thing is lack of resources for the community that a lot of these athletes come from. There needs to be more resources available for less disadvantaged student athletes, and there has to be a sense of uh, I'm trying to figure out the proper word. There has to be a sense of not compatibility per se, but there has to be something where we have to adjust to the certain situations of certain people that come into the university. A lot of these athletes, African American athletes, come from disadvantaged communities, and they also have to go back to these communities when school is over. So having accessibility to certain resources that we may need, such as guidance and people that actually care and can tailor to our needs specifically, would be something that would be very effective with African American student athletes. I had a conversation with the athlete the other day, and we were talking about how a lot of student athletes that are minorities do not have the opportunity to actually explore what they want. We come from a community where athletes are praised, and we're not actually a part of the real reality sometimes. So we need to um, figure out what these athletes' true passions are. What they really like, what they really love, and are interested in besides athletics, because it can be taken away from us at any time. So one thing is tailored learning and tailored specific things to athletes that come from disadvantaged communities, in order to pull the things that they never really thought of out of them. A lot of us are just guided into the direction that you know other people think is best for us, but it needs to be tailored to what's best for the person. So that's one thing that I see is something that's specifically tailored to the athletes that come from more disadvantaged communities, and making them more aware and more um, accessible to things that they never had accessibility to.
I think you touched on two things that is applicable to like the Black community in general, just accessibility and education. So if you could, both of you, just maybe go into other issues that affect the Black community in general, and maybe how sports can help bring those issues to the forefront.
Um, I think if athletes were made more aware of other things besides sports, like social issues, I do see a lot of minority athletes, being more aware and speaking up for, social issues, but they are doing that off, raw, information. So there needs to be more, people that can step up and are able to provide these athletes with this information that is correct, and really inform them, and give them a historical point of view of what we've been through, and what we can do to change it proactively. So that's one thing that I definitely see more education, because I know everyone hasn't had the opportunity to be aware of our history in full detail. That's just something that that comes with the American system, and that has to be fixed over time. But immediately there can be systems put in place, whereas though athletes could be educated more on issues that have more things to do with their community. The accessibility to these things, now that we have the resources here, will help the athletes be more informed in the information that they're putting out, and even maybe put some more care and effort into the acts that they're performing, as far as protesting, and making other people aware of our issues, and fighting systemic racism and things like that.
I forgot the question, so can you repeat it?
Yeah, no problem. I was asking about issues that you think just affect the Black community in general, and how sports could be used to bring them to the forefront.
I think one of the honestly, like, the baseline issues is just like we've been talking about, a lack of resources, and not just a lack of resources, but a lack of kind of generational wealth. people talk about this in the past about like how, basically systems that were set up to kind of, how do I say this? Like disenfranchised Black communities have had like effects leading into today. So even if Black people in general are like rising up in like ranks and education and like opportunities, it doesn't matter because they don't have that foundation. So I think one of the best things we can do is just resourcing. I think community service, I think just general donations. A lot of times, like, people like to talk about education and things like that. And I think that's important. But like a lot of people just need money. They just need money. They just need food. They need clothes. Like they just need material things, So I think, and that's kind of why I changed my post this year, because sometimes it can be easy to kind of use education as a cop out to do anything, right? Like, oh yeah, I read all the books. Like I know what I watched, 13th. So like, I know what's happening with Black people in America. It's like, no, but these people like actually need to feed their kids, So I think that's one of the biggest things that I've been kind of taking to heart this year is, going beyond just, listen, I love a good book. Reading is important. Reading is fundamental. But, kind of going beyond that and being like, actually, how can I help an actual Black person today? Like, how can I help Black people through like either money or like my time? A lot of people do things like, driving people around, picking up their groceries, like mutual aid, things like that. Like that, I think is like what's really going to heal people. Because at the end of the day, we live in like a society where like you need money to buy things, like it's not just like a situation where we can just like talk our way out of it, like we actually need actionable items. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been focusing on this year. It's just like getting involved in like community service and like mutual aid and sometimes it's even just like helping people, guide people to where the resources are, even if I can't necessarily provide it myself. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
Do you guys feel that as institutions, there's like an obligation to, act on these things and do these actions to be anti-racist and help the community and give these resources to the community that the schools are in?
Yeah. To me, the question that always gets me is why not? Like, obviously, you're not obligated to do anything. No one's obligated to do anything. But if you're going to say that, your mission is equality and you want to end systemic racism and you don't like systemic racism and you want to end inequality and things like that, it's like that doesn't just happen with you talking about it, especially big institutions like a university, for example, where it's, again, you have an obligation to do whatever you want with your money. But I think that if you're going to say that you support Black communities and you're going to say you support Black people, then you have to show up for them through like actually helping them in material ways, especially at a school like Pittsburgh that is so close to the Hill District, that are so close to these Black neighborhoods that need help. It's like, why wouldn't you? So, I think anti-racism a lot of times can get caught up in like theories and like, this is what you should do in these situations. And like, we have to have the tough conversations. It's like, okay, we have to have tough conversations, of course. Like that's what this whole thing is about. But like having tough conversations in your ivory tower isn't going to help people, out in the street. So yeah, I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that I've noticed personally is like, I know I've seen people who have like, okay, you can talk the talk, but like, what do you actually do? So yeah.
Yeah, she made a really valid point. As far as what can we do right now, definitely, I see all the slogans, equality, and it's great to have these roundtables and these talks. But when we talk about ending hunger, or we talk about ending deforestation or whatever, they're planting trees and then they're at the food banks giving out food. So why not go to the African American community and do a community garden? Why not go and, instill a program where a teacher can go 2 times a week and, inform the kids on how to spend their money and, how to get into college and how to prepare for these big tests that are designed to hold minority communities behind. So I definitely agree with, everything she said about having, why not? Why not do these things? If you're gonna have all the slogans posted everywhere and have it on our backs and put it on our shirts and put it on our pants and have patches on all the jerseys, why not actually walk the walk? Because any other issue, the walk is being walked, and the resources are being put into community. So why not enforce these things and actually work towards being proactive instead of reactive. So I agree.
Thank you. Those are all good answers. I guess another thing, like for our generation, we're all like between like 20 and 22. So George Floyd wasn't our first time witnessing something like this. For most of us, it was Trayvon Martin. And there's been a difference in like the reaction of the people. So I feel like now, like there's more response and more like people buying into it. So why do you think there's that difference now? Like why we're speaking up more now?
I think it's a combination of things, right? Like, I think obviously the George Floyd situation specifically, the way it was filmed, the way it like happened, it was very just stark. It was kind of a thing that you couldn't really avoid. I think that was part of it. I think honestly, to me, the biggest part of it was with COVID-19, people were just stuck at home. And I think like when you're in a situation where you can't go anywhere and you can't kind of look away and you can't distract yourself, I think for a lot of people, they just literally have to sit with it. And I know I did. Um, and I think in an era with like social media and things like that, people are just more connected than ever. And I think that makes people more empathetic in general. Especially like our generation, we're so into social media that I think having that kind of interconnectedness made people kind of have to see how people were reacting to it and have to see people's emotions and how they were connecting to George Floyd. And you're right, this isn't the first time. And I mean, it wasn't even the last time after George, right? So um, to me, I think it was just something had to give, right? Like it wasn't a situation where people could explain it away because it wasn't on video, or people could explain it away because the person was a bad person or had a criminal or whatever. Like people, like you couldn't really explain it away, right? And I think like that, the kind of just like cruelty of it all, I think that's unfortunately like that's what it took for people to be like, oh wait, like maybe this is something we should be addressing. So yeah, I think that's what kind of played into it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was a perfect storm. Everything, culmination of things coming together at the right time, that allowed, everything to play out the way it did. I was definitely glad for some of the things that happened. Maybe necessarily not the way they were carried out, but maybe some of the things that happened. We need more people that will, step up like that. And it's okay to protest, it's okay to be upset, but it takes time to make change. And in this era, it's hard to really value time. Everything is expected to happen, very almost instantly. When it doesn't work like that, and honestly, we need to settle with, the fact that things take time. Trayvon Martin's case took several years to be, for uh, what is his name? George Zimmerman to be, exonerated of all his charges and to be acquitted. So, it takes time, and and it takes persistence and consistency. So, knowing that, we need to, continue to fight, and the fight needs to continue in many other ways besides, the reactive way that we saw in the streets and the forms of the protests and the roundtables and the talks and everything. The fight needs to continue on, realizing that, these things and change doesn't happen overnight. Social media has, kind of gave us a distorted image of, what should happen and how quickly it should happen and the timeline it should happen, when really there is none. The civil rights movement was years, Jim Crow was years, slavery was centuries. So, these things really take time. And the best thing we could do is just be persistent and consistent in our mission to fight against systemic racism and fight against police brutality and figure out a valid solution to the issues that we're facing.
Thank you. So I'll end with this final question, but as athletes, we do have a platform, whether that's on the collegiate level, the professional level. So a lot of athletes have been, starting to speak up more and using their platforms for activism to fight for these issues. So when I talk about that, what are some athletes that come to mind that have been doing the work that you can think of?
I can say there's honestly been a lot of effort by a lot of different athletes. LeBron James, um, Patrick Mahomes, Colin Kaepernick. There's been a lot of effort. I just think that the communities that we come from, we're not the most qualified to speak on these issues, and oftentimes we get so involved in our sports that we miss the rounder, the more broader idea of what's really going on. A lot of professional athletes are sort of out of touch with what's going on, and that's it's not their fault, but fame nowadays carries a level of a sort of different type of level of expectance now. They expect people to be more knowledgeable than they are really, and it forces people kind of into a space where they start to say things where they may not be as informed on the issue. So I think LeBron and Kaepernick and there are several, maybe smaller athletes that have really, stepped up and really, came to the plate as far as, the fight because they have a voice. But, I think oftentimes as athletes, we need to understand when it's time to speak, and when it's time to get educated. And say, I don't really know the answer right now. I'll have to, go get educated on the issue by somebody that's a professional, and come back to you, or give the person that is a professional the platform, your platform, in order to speak on these issues. Because a lot of the times, the media forces, athletes to speak on things that we're not really qualified to speak on. We don't really have all the answers, and they expect athletes to be, and they know that, athletes may not have all the answers, but it's their job to push, so we can't blame the media. We have to blame ourselves for, stepping out of our comfort zone sometimes, and maybe trying to, offer a solution to a issue that we don't have a solution to. So I respect everything that they have done, and and how much they've been proactive with the issue of racism and police brutality, and everything that the minority community is going through right now. But I think sometimes we just need to know the difference when it's time to lend the platform to somebody else that may be more educated, because at the end of the day, just like we have our jobs as athletes, they have their jobs as activists and professionals and professors and philanthropists. So we need to understand when it's time to study up on the issues and come back with it, and figure out what's the best way to approach a question or a certain situation.
Yeah, the athletes that kind of stick out for me, I are basically the entire WNBA. I don't know if either of you have been following them, but WNBA is kind of one of the most inclusive leagues in the country, really professional leagues. They've been walking the walk since the beginning. And, it's the WNBA. They don't necessarily have roaring fans and like roaring support from, I guess, like a larger audience. But they've organized, they've pushed for progressive politicians, and they've done the community work, and they were kind of the first leagues to kind of begin all the protesting during games, especially in the bubble. The WNBA has been walking the walk since the beginning, and that's kind of a league that I think obviously flies under the radar. And I think that's kind of more indicative of what I think athletes can do. They do speak out, but a lot of times they just do the background kind of dirty work, and get in the communities. And I think that's kind of where athletes can really find their niche, because like Ade said, athletes aren't scholars, they're reading books like the rest of us. They're trying to catch up like the rest of us, so, with that kind of money and resources and that kind of platform, a lot of times the best thing you can do is just give to the people who need a bigger platform, give to the people who genuinely need to get their voice heard. And it isn't as flashy, but I think a lot of times it's more effective. So yeah, I just got to shout the WNBA out because they've been really putting in the work this past year, especially.
Thank you. Okay, before we end, is there any message that you want to leave with the people?
I'll say, I'll say Rome, or however the saying goes, Rome or Greece wasn't built overnight. So, like I said, persistence and consistency is, the main ingredient in the fight for change. Like Shanada said, the background dirty work is really, what needs to be done. The proactive and not the reactive work. The work in the background that doesn't get glorified is it's hard to break old habits. A lot of people want the glory. They want everything that comes with it. They want the recognition. But the important thing right now is to do the gritty work. The work in the communities, the work in the community where nobody wants to go, the work with the kid that nobody wants to talk to, the providing resources to the community that nobody wanted to enter, allowing, children to see things that they would never have seen if it was left to, their parents, not even saying that their parents are neglecting them, but, oftentimes they may not have the time, the resources, or the education to provide those things to the children. Just being in this roundtable, it gave me, the idea of, community, feeding off each other's ideas, because oftentimes you hearing somebody speak may provoke something that the other person didn't necessarily think of. So, it takes a community, it takes a village to raise a child. So, it takes a collective effort of everyone to, build up these communities and, take the community in a new direction. It just won't be done by one person. It's great, all the awards and everything for one person that has created change, but it has always taken a village to, raise a child and as well as a community. So we have to have a collective effort and be willing to work together and listen and, be patient in the process. So I can say that the gritty work is really what needs to be done, and doing a lot of proactive work, in the background, and, giving to the people that have not had it, so that's big.
The last thing I'll say is, how do I say this? I'll say, like, anti-racist work requires, a lot of times it requires kind of sacrifice of your own self, right? Of your own money, of your own time. So the two things I'll say about that, the first, I'll kind of reiterate, like, giving like actual material things is really important. And a lot of times it's like conscious, like, oh, could I buy this thing I want from a Black owned business? Could I do a community service project in a community that's majority Black? Could I, like things like that, where it's like you consciously have to like reach out, you constantly have to like be consistently giving, like he said about persistence, like one action, while it is important, it's not gonna like that's not gonna get the ball rolling. Like we need like consistent, enthusiastic, sustained action. So that's the one thing I'll say, is like being more like proactive with like the ways you can give to people like materially. And then the second thing I'll say is that like standing up for Black people, specifically when Black people are not in the room, to me is one of the most important things you can do. Because again, it's very easy to say nice things when Black people can hear you. It's harder to do it when there are no Black people around, especially if it's people who are your family members or your friends. So like one thing I'll always say is that no matter what, like as far as like material things and stuff, like helping the Black community that way, no matter what like we can do, like you within your like non-Black circles can reach out to people that I can never touch, right? So you can't just sit back and just like be passive and be like, oh well, I don't think the same way they do. It's like, okay, but they go out into the communities and they are like the doctors who don't provide the same healthcare to Black people. They're the lawyers who don't, you know what I mean? Like they actually have like effects in Black people's lives. And like, if you can do anything to stop that, why wouldn't you? Right? So for me, it's for me, like to consider you an ally, you have to like actually give something of yourself in situations where it doesn't benefit you at all, right? Because like community service can be like, oh yeah, like I'm doing good things, and it can be like that kind of benefit. But it's like standing up to someone in your family who talks crazy about Black people, to me, is even more important, because like you don't gain anything from that, right? In fact, you might lose something, you know what I mean? Like in fact, you might kind of, strain a relationship. But it's like, that's kind of the allyship that I think is most important, because again, you can say whatever you want around me, but when I'm out of the room, if I'm around, like, if I'm not in the room, if I'm, not involved in the situation, it's like, how much are you going to stand up for me? How much are you going to stand up for, Monica or Ade or like whoever, how much are you going to stand up for the Black community in situations where you have nothing to gain from it, if that makes sense? So yeah, those are the two things I'll say.
Those are two really good notes to end on. I just want to thank both of you guys for coming on this platform and joining me to have this conversation. Hopefully, this helps keep small rolling, helps invoke change, and it means something to somebody so they go and make a difference. So I thank you both for taking the time to join me today, and I thank everybody for watching.